Welcome to Bodhi Surf Yoga, and let's begin the philosophy of the 8 limbs of yoga. Before we begin, we're going to take a time, and we're going to do this every class. We're going to take a time, transition time, so I call it. We're going to sit down with the back straight. We're going to close the eye, and we're going to start paying attention to the breath, inhaling and exhaling. Inhale and exhale. Try to breathe deeply and pay attention to the breath coming in and out. And this will allow us for our minds to come into this present moment, into the right here, right now. So we can absorb all the learning that we're about to do a little bit better. Then perhaps join the hands together right in front of the heart. And for a moment, remember the intention why you're doing this. What is it that you want to learn? What is it that you want to get from this yoga path, this yoga journey? And then on the next exhale, just drop the hands back down. And slowly, let's open up the eyes. And let's begin this journey we're about to do. So on the last episode, we were talking about a little bit of intro and history of yoga, what it was about. Of course, it's such an expansive subject that we could do it many ways. We could explain it in different ways. But this time, as I'm reaching towards the Yoga Sutras in the 8 limbs of yoga, I try to create a brief history from that point of view. And so right now we're going to start with what is the Yoga Sutras. The Yoga Sutras is like one of the Bibles of yoga. And this is written supposedly by Patanjali, which is a mythical character. And Patanjali, I like it because for me, this could be a very methodical, pragmatic, and even scientific book. What it does in the different 4 chapters of the Yoga Sutras is that, first of all, Patanjali starts explaining what yoga is. And that comes on the second Yoga Sutra, and I'll get there. Then after that, Patanjali says there's suffering, we all suffer, and these are the reasons why we suffer. And then after that, Patanjali moves, and this is what we can do about it to release the suffering and find a better state of consciousness and happiness. So that's the journey of the Yoga Sutras, and it's divided in 4 padas. In the first pada, it's mostly, I will say, that about contemplation, different levels of meditation and contemplation. On the second pada, which is the one that we're going to focus our attention, it talks about the roots of suffering and what we can do to help, like a process that will contribute for us to realize where that suffering is really coming from and what we can do about it. This is the process of the 8 limbs of yoga. Then on the third one, it moves more towards the vritis, and which is like superpowers you can develop if you follow the path of yoga. But we're not going to get there, and we're not going to set our interest in that part. And the fourth pada, it's more again about samadhi, different states and levels of consciousness. As I said, like I was going to talk about a little bit about the second sutra of the Yoga Sutras, which is Sita Vritti Nirodha. And this is like the explanation of what yoga is. Yoga Sita Vritti Nirodha. And the meaning of this basically says yoga is the cessations of the fluctuations of the mind. It can be quite intimidating if we look at it just like that. And it's like, okay, I'm not gonna make it, I better close the book. Have you ever seen this kind of movie where the movie starts with the end and it doesn't make sense, but as you see the whole movie, then it circles back and you're like, I get it now. I feel the explanation of the second Yoga Sutra is just that. It starts with the explanation that you gotta understand the whole thing in order to understand what Patanjali meant by that. When I first started reading the sutras, I was like, and someone told me the second sutra is the definition of what yoga is. I was like, okay, I'm done. And if the purpose is to like stop thinking, it's not gonna happen. Obviously, if you were to close the sutra and say, okay, I'm gonna meditate here, I'm gonna stay here until I stop thinking, it's not gonna happen for you. It's not gonna happen for us, probably. So the idea, the practice is that we follow this long process. And when I'm saying long, I'm not talking about a year process. I'm talking about decades, about a whole lifetime process that would allow us to sit down and watch first the fluctuations of the mind, watch what we're thinking and why are we thinking what we're thinking, and then move into not ignoring those fluctuations, and eventually, because we ignore them so much, they will go away and we find this state of peace. Okay, so that is the essential part of what the Yoga Sutras are about. So now we're gonna move into the second chapter, the second pada. That's how we call it. Pada means leg, but in the Yoga Sutras, there's 4 padas. And the second pada says, like Patanjali says, and I'm not gonna get into this, this is more maybe another course, but Patanjali says this is the reasons why we suffer. We suffer for the ego, we suffer for the illusion, we suffer for the fear, we suffer for the clinginess, the attachment. And this is what we can do about it. It's great that there's actually a solution to it. So we have to start the 8 limbs of yoga by breaking one conception that has been really misunderstood in the modern world. The concept that yoga is about asana practice. Asana is one of the limbs of yoga, because in yoga, in the path of yoga, everything is being used. Every part of our being is being used for the spiritual path. That is including our bodies. So we use the bodies, we use the asana, and for the practice of cleaning ourselves up. So that is one limb of yoga, but it's not only yoga. You can practice and you can grab that part of yoga, and that would be great, but it's not yoga as a total. It's just one aspect of it. When Patanjali, or whoever, because Patanjali, as I said, is a mythical character. It could be many people. It could be a book that evolved little by little by people using their wisdom. But the 8 limbs of yoga, it's a process that goes from the more tangible aspects of what we can change in our life to the more subtle and internal aspects. We go one by one, just like we do in a school. You know, we don't go and learn in school first how to write a novel. No, we go in kindergarten and we learn letters. And then we go to school, we learn how to write and read. And then we move to high school, and then we learn how to understand what we are writing and reading. And then we go to university, we write a book. Sort of like how the process go about. So that is the 8 limbs of yoga. We don't start like maybe in this practice, in this path, it's not that we start by meditating and see how we can achieve deeper levels of consciousness. No, we start by the most tangible part, which is the actions and the interactions we have with the world around us. And that is the yamas. That is the first limb of yoga. So we're going to start the journey here, the yamas. It talks about like suggestions, recommendations of what we can do, so we can interact with the world around us in a better way. And it does this not only so we can serve better to other living creatures, but also like we can feel better within us. The yamas and niyamas, the yamas especially, the external observances, we're going to call it. The intention first, I will say, and this is something I think that doesn't get to mention a lot, it's about us realizing that connectiveness that we have with every living being around us. So before we begin about thinking, oh, I want to be nice, I want to be kind about everything, it's just the sense of awareness, the realization that we are so connected to everything that surrounds us, that we think of nature as an extension of our body. We think of others as an extension of ourselves. We think about other living creatures, meaning animals, plants, as an extension of who we are. That means that the way we treat all the other living creatures and nature and the environment is the way we're treating ourselves. Let's begin then with the first yama. The first yama, it's Ahimsa, non-violence. And I would say, if I wanted to like put together, like if someone wants to ask me, like, what is it in yoga that you would say is the most important part of the practice? That one, living a life with non-violence. Then you can skip the rest because it sums up everything else, because it teaches a very big lesson about how do we treat ourselves and how do we treat others. So again, Ahimsa means non-harming, non-violence. Normally, when I used to hear teachers talking about Ahimsa, it starts about how we can practice Ahimsa. But I would like to start by the root of how we can practice this non-harmony is by acknowledging this connection, that we have with every living essence that surrounds us. And I would like to tell a story. This is a story I talk about quite frequently. It comes from one book that I highly loved. It's a simple, easy reading book from Mitch Albom, Tuesdays with Morrie. And it gave an example about this wave. There was once upon a time, there was this little wave crossing the ocean. And as the wave was approaching the shore, the wave noticed that once it hit the shore, every wave that was hitting the shore was just crashing and disappearing. So the wave freaked out. And the wave said, I don't want to do that. I don't want that to happen to me. I want to continue being a wave. So the wave was holding back. And as the wave was holding back, it was holding the other waves back until another wave came and asked, hey, what you doing? And he said, well, I'm not going. I don't want to go. I'm moving forward because if I continue, I will crash and I will disappear. And the other wave said, well, you don't understand. You're not just a wave. You're the ocean in a shape of a wave. And that was really revealing to me. It came in a moment where I was experiencing a lot of anxiety in my life. I was afraid of death. I was afraid of like many things like that. And it gave me the realization that although my body's in this shape right now, I'm just a part of this web of life. And it gives you a lot of perspective. It gives you a lot of perspective. It changes like, I feel like one of the Patanjali mentions all the time the ego. And we get really caught up in this sense of individualization. I'm just this, I'm just Pilar, I'm just this person, I'm just this. But we're more than that. We're part of this huge, amazing web of life. So for me, non-violence begins with the acknowledging, we begin with the realization like the sense of non-separate, like not feeling separate from everything else, from nature, from others. So this is one important thing. How do we begin by non-harming? Well, we begin with that acknowledge. I think that one of the really nice things we can do in the yoga practice is maybe develop this practice every day to wake up and as you open your eyes, today I want to live a life without harming. How would that look like? What decisions would that change? What actions would that change? What thoughts would that change? And let's review little areas of how would it affect the way we treat others? How like will we be talking different and doing things different? Maybe something to analyze. How would it change the way we treat ourselves? Because that's an area that we can be really harmful. The internal dialogue we keep in ourselves. Sometimes, again, because the illusion, we build in this conditioning in our heads, you know. It gets built ever since we are like little babies, and by the time they say that we're 7 years old, we're programmed. And all this conditioning is leading our thoughts. It's just narratives that we've been carrying around. They don't belong to us. They're no new narrative, and they might not be helpful for our life, but we buy them and we believe those narratives were created by us, and therefore we support them. And those narratives might tell us, you're not enough, or you don't deserve this, or in order for you to be happy, you have to have this, or you have to look like this, or you have to be like this. And we live by those narratives, and we harm ourselves because of those narratives, and they don't even work, or they don't even make sense. I'm a woman, and we carry a lot of narratives about how our body should look like, or God forbid we age, you know, because then maybe our value decreases. So those are narratives that can create harmful effects in the way we talk to ourselves. So how about if we start looking at those narratives and changing? And again, I am enough. Again, we start looking at the mirror, and instead of looking at what's wrong with us every single day of our life, we say, oh, look how pretty. Look at my beautiful smile. Look at my eyes. Look at this and look at that, and look at all the good things we like about ourselves. So changing the narratives would be a good way to be kind with ourselves. And then the way we treat ourselves is going to be the way we ended up treating others. And that is important in the principle of Ahimsa, nonviolence. Then another important part, nature. What is happening in this world, the Mother Nature is giving us many signs that we're not doing the right thing. And we're all like maybe like trying to change our ways, our actions. But before we change the ways and actions, we got to go back to the root and see what narratives are running within us, that create harm in the outside. So we can actually not just like think, okay, what actions really do I have to do today to protect nature? No. What do I have to drop internally for myself and me to take the good actions and thoughts to live in a well-balanced and harmonious way with the world that's around me? I feel that then, if we want to call ourselves yoga practitioners, by default, by following the first principle of what yoga is about, non-harming, we would be finding that state of harmonious balance with Mother Nature. And what does that look like? Well, then we think about the decisions we take as consumers. Then we think about like taking only what we need and moving and not damaging, because the more that we take what we don't need, the more it has an impact on nature. I think nature is talking to us and sending a message. And I don't remember where I heard this, but I heard once that nature is always telling us about like sending our messages of how we're doing. If we don't listen, nature talks louder and louder and louder. So I think nature is talking very loud about how we have to go back and find that place of balance and harmony that every living creature has, that maybe we have been losing for a while. How do we do that? We get back to that sense of connection. A tip of advice, Now I talked about like waking up and seeing like, how do I live a life of no harming today? Waking up also and reestablish every day that sense of connection with nature. How do I do that? Well, just by hearing the sounds of nature. Go outside, walk barefoot, feel the earth, root the feet in the earth. Have food that nourish you, like they just came straight from nature. Maybe start your day with that, with very natural ingredients that just came from nature. And that would be what Ahimsa is. And now we move to the second Yama, which is Satya. One important thing to say is that it's important to take in consideration that it's not that you practice each Yama separately. You can see when we're finished the 5 of them, that all kind of like tangle together. We try to blend them all together. So the next one, Satya, is about truthfulness. It's more than honesty. It's more than just saying the truth. It's about more, like I would put it, more about integrity in our words, in our actions, in the way we behave in the world, in our character, in the way we behave when we think nobody's watching us. There's a lot of truthfulness in the way we practice integrity. But going back, let's start back again. Satya means more than telling the truth. And for this particular Yama, I would like actually to bring the 4 gates of truth. This is something I heard again. I've been hearing a lot about it, and I like to use it. And the funny thing is, when I use it, the more time that I use it and practice it over time in my life, the more that I get quiet, or I change the way I say things, and I change the space where my truth is coming. Sometimes when we're very reactive, which means just reacting to whatever someone says or someone's do, the response is going to come from the ego. And it's never going to come out really well if it's from the ego and out of emotion, and if that emotion is negative. But if it comes from the heart, even like if there's similarities of what we're saying, it's going to come from other place that is going to create good. It's going to make things better. Most times. Now remember that the thing is, like, we're responsible for our actions, not the actions of others. So that means that when we're practicing the Yamas, it doesn't mean that we're going to get all these waves of kindness coming from other people. It might not. But the important thing is, the only thing we have control of is our actions, our words, and our thoughts. That's the only thing we can do. But most times, it improves our lives. So the 4 gates. When we're about to say something, we have to first distinguish that there's a very good difference between the truth and our opinion. Okay, so most times we're only expressing our opinions, and again, we're expressing what it comes from our conditioning, our narratives that are not even ours, our beliefs, and it might be true to us, but it might not be true to the other people. And it might create more harm than other thing. Again, this is when Ahimsa and Satya get together. So the point of Satya, the 4 gates, is when we're about to say something that we believe to this is true, then let's ask 4 questions before it comes up. First, is it really true? If we get a yes, then we ask another question. Is it really kind? If we say yes, then we ask the other question. Is this a good moment to say it? And then, if it's yes, the final question. Well, you can change them a little bit, the order, but is it necessary to say it? So I found that again, that when I practice this, there's so many times in my life that I'm, no, nothing to say, sorry. Let's move on. Because it doesn't meet all those 4 gates. And it really does change the way I say things. It really changed the way I'm about to approach a situation. Again, like what we're trying to do in this, aspect of the yoga path is becoming less reactive to everything. So what I mean by that is sometimes we want to be nice, we want to be kind, we want to be generous and all that. But then when we're facing people who are conflicted into our beliefs, or we're having troubles with other people, then all of a sudden we cannot be nice, we cannot be truthful, we cannot be kind, we cannot act with integrity. The idea of the yoga path is to act with equanimity and integrity in everything we do, regardless of the other people. That means being less reactive and being more truthful with our beliefs of what we believe, that how we believe we should be towards the world in every occasion, not only when people are being nice to us. So this is what, like, the help that we get from Satya. But it goes deeper than that, as I said. It brings a lot of integrity. I like it that in yoga, when I first started practicing yoga, and I hear a lot of people saying, you practice yoga, you must be really calm. No. If we're very calm, then there's no reason why we should practice all this. Actually, maybe like those of us really into the yoga path is because we have a lot of work to do inside. So this is my disclaimer. I'm not like that. I try to. But the idea of the practice is to find this state of equanimity we'll hold inside. That doesn't mean that we are calm and cool and collective all the time. But also, like, I have this illusion that the yoga practice will make me feel like in this state of la la land all the time. It's not the case, actually. Like the real yoga, when you practice, it makes you face a lot of darkness within you. It actually puts you face to face and tells you you're responsible for how you behave. You're responsible for what is going on inside. So you first have to acknowledge the darkness in order for you to work and transform that. If we don't acknowledge it, then we live in this maya, in this illusion, and we blame every single person around us for our bad behavior. So yoga gives us a lot of responsibility. So coming back to the integrity, that's another side of Satya. Being more aware of what is going on inside. One thing that works for me, that I heard from a meditation teacher, is going to the root. And what I mean by that is when we get sad, upset, when there's resentment, when we're holding hate or resentment within us towards other people, towards another situation, before we start blaming others for those situations, we go back to the root. What is it that person or that situation touch in the root of our conditioning, our narratives, or pain that is causing us pain? To give an example, let's say we get in a conflict with someone else, and we feel a lot of resentment or hate by the way the other person did something. Sometimes I have faced those situations. I go back and what is it? And I go back and back and back to the root, and I feel that the reason of the pain was mostly because whatever happened makes me feel I'm not good enough, or made me feel not accepted. And I want to feel accepted. I want to feel good enough so I can be loved. And when you heal that thing, you realize that it's behind the screen. It all happens behind the screen. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that some other people might do things that are really like harmful or wrong, or don't feel good or anything, intentionally or unintentionally. But instead of reacting upon the situation or being passive aggressive, you can express your truth and then deal with it on the root. And that is one good way to figure out like the integrity of Satya. Satya is not only about saying the truth, it's about the four gates. It's about knowing when and how to say the truth. But it's not about Satya in our words. Of course, for me, the first yoga goes into the words. It's our biggest weapon sometimes, and it can be our biggest tool to address and heal the world outside. But it's also about integrity. How do we act when we're not being watched? How do we approach the world when we're not being watched? The fun thing about like this journey we call life is people can see many actions, but nobody else in this world knows what's going on inside. Only us, only we know the intentions of why we do what we do. So we're very responsible for that. So that's part of Satya. Always like keep in check. Why are we doing what we're doing? Are we trying to cause harm? Are we trying to cause good? So moving like, and now we put Satya and Ahimsa together, and we develop this again, a state of integrity in our actions. Again, yoga begins in our words, yoga begins in our actions. The most tangible, external part of the practice. And one more thing to talk about when we talk about the subject of Satya, it's being in a state of vulnerability and showing up in the right way. Facing, the moments when we have to face our own truth. I'm feeling jealous, I'm feeling envy for this situation. I acted wrong. I have to show up and fix it. Which is funny because sometimes it is what we tell our kids, but then we kind of forget when we're adults. Okay, we made a mistake, show up, say sorry, fix it, do something about it. We made a mistake, was intentional or non-intentional, it doesn't matter. You hurt someone, we hurt some. What are we doing there? And also like to continue in that state of vulnerability when we are humble enough to acknowledge when we fail, when we said something we shouldn't supposed to, or when we didn't stood up when it was time to stood up, things like that. So that's the important thing to rescue about Satya. It's about showing up as well, being courageous enough to showing up and say, yes, I made a mistake. That's one of the hardest parts of Satya too. I made a mistake, wasn't my intention, but I did it. How can I make it up? How can I fix it? And that's a lot of courage and a lot of vulnerability. We're wrapping up Satya and we're moving to the third yama, which is Asteya. Asteya is considered non-stealing. And of course, it can be easy breezy. If we think of Asteya non-stealing, like, that's easy. I don't take things that don't belong to me. But again, like every yoga concept, it goes deeper than that. Asteya, it means not taking what doesn't belong to us. That means even in energetic levels. That means I'm going to include here one very important aspect of Asteya, manipulation, which whether we want to acknowledge or not, we do it. We do it sometimes. We do it in a very subtle way. We do it in ways we don't even notice, but we do it. So taking energy from others, it's a way of taking what doesn't belong to us, dragging people out with our drama or making drama, and manipulating people. That's a way of stealing their energy. But I would like also to take another form of Asteya that once again create a commitment with the environment when we are turning our eyes into the yoga path. The not taking what doesn't belong to us. Nature is well balanced and has enough of abundance. If we look around, well, I'm right now surrounded by beautiful nature. And what the first thing I feel every time I look at nature is that I see abundance. And nature has enough to provide for every living creature, for the needs, but not for the excess. So again, this goes back to tying Ahimsa with Asteya, not taking what doesn't belong to us. And everything that we're abusing and we're taking away also from future generations. That then we come into the concept of sustainability. What does it mean? Taking enough, but not in an excess that we're sacrificing the resources for future generations. So yoga is very important. This yoga practice becomes very important when it comes to sustainability. it's good to take a, like when we approach the subject of Asteya, maybe, and as a homework, and I hope you do it, grab your notebook and think about if there's many ways we're taking what doesn't belong to us from Mother Nature, how we can change. Every time we're about to buy something that we don't need, let's ask the question actually, every time we're about to buy something, do we need this? Is it necessary? Are we really going to use it? Because if not, we're taking it from someone else. We're taking it, doesn't belong to us. One other thing that is part of Asteya, more than, it's not only about stealing like someone else's phone. It's about like when we're hoarding things that we just want to keep it because there's an emotional or value to it. But maybe there's someone who needs that. Another good homework that I want to leave in today's practice is go around your house and declutter. And we're going to go to decluttering other practices of yoga. But declutter the house and take out and say, okay, I don't really need this. And it's in good shape. And I might have an emotional value attachment to it. But maybe someone else needs it. So what is it that you can give up? Because you don't need it, but you're holding it. And you should allow for someone else who needs it to use it. This is a good practice of Asteya. So again, we come now with 3 Yamas, the Ahimsa, the Satya, the Asteya, and we go back and we tie them all together. And we realize that also one way that we can be harmful and dishonest, but also like as a product of non-practicing Asteya is stealing time. And when I mean stealing time is sometimes we spend, time is so valuable and precious, and we go through, so in this society, we go through life saying, which is a lie, in Satya, I don't have time. No, we all have time. Time is all we have. At the end, time is all we have. The real comment would be, I don't want to make time for this. I didn't make time for this. Because at the end, time is one of the most precious things we're given. As long as we're alive, we have time. So one of the things that I liked when I started realizing what this practice of yoga was about, it was about honor the sacredness of life. And sometimes when we get caught up in sometimes to avoid or to procrastinate or to avoid doing things we don't want to do, or to avoid being mindful and present, we get caught up in maybe things that actually increase the laziness in us. And I'm talking about, like, let's bring it to the modern terms, social media. And sometimes we have a lot to do, and we say we don't have time or we didn't have time, but how many minutes we spend on Instagram, Facebook, or whatever other social media we have? Because we were avoiding whatever task we had that makes us being present and mindful. Maybe it was cooking, maybe it was doing the dishes, maybe it was spending time with family, maybe it was time to meditate. Okay, if we're gonna be honest, that's again like tidying it up. If we're gonna be honest and say I don't have time to meditate. Well, do we have time to be in social media? Yeah. If we have time to be in social media, we have time to meditate. So honoring the sacredness of every minute would be not stealing time. And that would be another way of Asteya. Now, the number 4 Yama, it's Brahmacharya. And Brahmacharya, I will just translate it in simple terms as moderation. In more traditional terms, and I'm saying just so you, like if you hear from some other sources, Brahmacharya was considered for yogi practitioners a lot of moderation and celibacy. But we're trying to bring all these concepts into modern terms and simple terms that we can apply in our lives. So the key word for this, for Brahmacharya, would be moderation, the middle path. As I mentioned before, Krishnamacharya said that anything that we do to the body with their like it's supposed to be good. If we do it in an excess, it becomes a poison. I want to bring out a very important point that maybe many of us can relate in terms of moderation. I think that we have been programmed to be busy. Being busy is the new syndrome of busyness, I would call it. Being busy, it's considered a really good thing in our culture. And I think it's important to question everything. It doesn't mean, I'm not saying that we should not be busy. I'm not saying that we should not work, but maybe sometimes because we wanna be okay with our culture and we overdo it. We're all the time busy and we never have time for anything else because we're busy. So I think that what moderation could be is moderation in everything. Also, like we live in a culture that overwork is seen as a positive thing. I think that sometimes over time, overworking can drain us, can again become a poison in our minds and in our bodies. And it doesn't mean that we should not work then or that we should be lazy. Actually, working, being productive, it's a very smart decision. It's good for us, but overdoing it might be not a good idea. So one thing to do on this practice of Brahmacharya is to look at the way we're working and try to, like, for the time that we're working, we're fully present, we're doing what we're supposed to do, we're avoiding distractions, we're mindfully in our work and providing an awesome service for the world. But then also be really respectful with the other times. And when we're spending time with our family, it's time to spend time with the family. It's maybe time to be away from the phone and messages and dedicate time to our kids or spouses or mothers and fathers. So moderation is looking like at the different compartments of life that we have, the different components of life, and dedicate time and attention to them, and not to overdo it, because once, like, if we put too much attention at work, then something has to be sacrificed. Maybe it's our family time, maybe it's our resting time, maybe any kind of quality time. Even if we love our job, it's our passion, and I can relate because I do what I love. It's always important to evaluate how much time we're spending on everything and be really mindful and honor the work we have and do it well, but also like being really mindful and honor the free time we have to be with our family or loved ones or friends, or just resting. Resting is as important. If we want to deliver good work in life, we have to rest as well. Take time for ourselves, personal time, and take time to re-energize. So this is one of the many ways that we can talk about moderation. Overindulgence, it's never good for the practice of yoga. Those of us who want to practice, we want to keep that middle path. And so overindulgence in any area is not a good idea. One of the things that I like about Krishnamacharya, they always said, eat, nurture your body, eat well, but don't overeating could create a lot of damage, and we know that in our body. So I have one of the most sacred teachers that I have, Tim Miller. I remember when I was with him, studying with him, and he said it actually several times, which he was like about the consumption of alcohol, but I think it applies to many things. And I understand he likes margaritas, and he said, the first margarita can be a good idea. The second one might not be such a good idea. The third one, definitely a bad idea. So the idea is that we don't have to deprive ourselves from every single pleasure that there is in life. We just have to see what is moderation for us, how much our body can take of each thing. I have mentioned it before that also, like, over-exercising is not a good idea. It can damage the body, it can damage the mind. So it's important to look for for all this, to taking all this in consideration when it comes to Brahmacharya. To do an observation, a constant observation. And again, I think I'm going to mention this several times. The point of the practice is to be so present that we honor the sacredness of life. And when we do that, we realize that we don't want to overdo anything. Because if we overdo it, we create more damage, we create harm. Let's remember the principle of Ahimsa. So that would be Brahmacharya. Now we're going to move to the next one, Aparigraha. Non-clinging, not attaching. Releasing, let it go. Let's explain. Patanjali says something that I think we can all agree. We have a natural tendency, which is almost like an instinct. It makes the whole sense in the world. We have the tendency to avoid pain and look for pleasure. And it's, as I said, it's a natural instinct. If we were living in nature, that's what makes us escape from a big tiger right in front of us. And that's like sometimes like, in order for us to feed ourselves, to nurture ourselves, we actually seek food that we like. It's pleasurable. Things are pleasurable. And so what Patanjali says, it makes a whole sense. Like it is fine. In yoga, it's not about avoiding and taking pleasure out of life. We want to have pleasure. We want to enjoy food. That's one of the things that sometimes we can become slaves of the yoga practice sometimes and do many practices that are more harmful for us than actually like beneficial. I have seen in over the years of practice in colleagues and students and people sacrificing the joy of eating, which is not part of the practice. The practice is being mindful about what we put in our bodies and how we're nurturing and when do we need to stop. I like that Iyengar said, like, and it's kind of nice to bring it out in Aparigraha. And actually, no, I like what Krishnamacharya says, like, know when it's good and know when to stop. And that's the key part of the practice of Aparigraha. It's not that we're going to put everything in black and white in the practice. This is good, this is not going to be. We're not robots. We're not being programmed. It's not a logarithm. What we want to do, it's make wise choices that we enjoy pleasure, but when there's too much pleasure, it becomes a poison. Then we stop. What I mean by that, I remember that reading in a book once that Krishnamacharya was asked that if this or that, like if exercise was good and food was good, if drinking was good for you or things like that, and he says anything in excess becomes a poison in the body and in the mind. I mean, exercising is great in the yoga practice, but too much exercise and the intention and the reasons why we're doing it can become a poison or can harm the body. Again, we tied up Aparigraha with Ahimsa. We don't want to harm the body by over-exercising. We want to do good for our bodies and feel great and release some adrenaline so we are good and happy during the day. We don't want to overdo it that we are injured and we can walk and we have to have surgeries or things like that. Same with food. We want to enjoy food without attaching to it. I love coffee. I'm a coffee drinker. I love coffee. And I'm famous. I think everyone that's around me knows how much I love coffee. And coffee, like there's many studies that say coffee is good, coffee is bad, this is good, this is bad, or anything. I think that it's important for us to experience it and see if it works or if it doesn't work. How does it feel in the body? We can be our own judges of that. But the thing that I liked, that I heard once, is that have coffee, but don't allow like coffee to own you. I'm in that process, working on that. That's why we practice yoga. We'll have to work on something. And that's what happens according to Aparigraha. Sometimes we cling to things so much that the things start owning us. It's nice to live in a nice house. It's nice to have the dream of a nice house, whatever that means for each of us. Remember also, we want to practice Asteya. We don't want to take too much space in this planet. But if we become obsessed with having the perfect house and attaching to it and all of it, then it breaks the freedom that yoga wants to create. Because at the end, that's what the practice wants. The practice, more than looking for like this high state of consciousness, wants to create freedom, wants for us to feel more free and liberated. And when we attach to ideas, to people or things, we don't feel free. You know, sometimes it's nice to have a relationship with others, but if we attach to relationships and the idea of how relationships should be, instead of finding love and freedom and kindness and enjoy it, it's going to become a struggle. You know, we want to maybe find our perfect, ideal person to share our life with. But if we become so attached with that idea and it's not happening, then it's going to own us. And we're going to feel so attached that we're not going to be happy. So the idea, again, behind Aparigraha is that we're constantly observing those attachments and see if we need to release them. But find the middle path. So yoga is that middle path, not too much, not too little. Finding that middle point where we're knowing when to let go and knowing when to fight for something. And how do we know? How do we know where that middle point is? Well, we'll get there. The idea is that the practice of meditation, of cleaning the body, of asana, of all this, and even the yamas and niyamas will take us there. Little by little, we take better, wise decisions. We know when it's time to let go, when it's time to hold on and be strong. But the idea is, yes, for example, addiction is a good example where we should practice Aparigraha. Sometimes something can be pleasurable, and then when we do it once and again and we start getting attached, it becomes an addiction. Then whatever it is that we're addicted to, it owns us. We kind of become that thing. We get so attached that our minds are constantly there and we lose track of who we are. So I think one good mental exercise, and again, grab your journal, you can look at what are those attachments we feel inside that are not letting us, that are holding us, that are not letting us be free. And I'm talking not about only things or people, all the conditioning ideas. Oh, this is how other people should be in order for me to accept them. Well, then maybe that is going to create a lot of attachment. This is what I need to have in order for me to be happy. Well, maybe that's like seeking the ball at the end of the rainbow. You're never going to get there. So the idea of Aparigraha, again, just to wrap it up, is to be aware of those patterns of thoughts that instead of allowing us to enjoy life are holding and making us tied free. Like they are not making us happy because we're not being free, because we're so attached from that. One good example I heard from this meditation teacher. I took this course long ago, and the teacher was talking about attachment, and he said it's like you're facing this way and you're grabbing and holding to a banana so hard because you're obsessed with this banana that you cannot even, like, if you let go and you look back, you'll notice that the whole background behind you is full of bananas. But you can't, and if someone comes and tell you, hey, just release it and look back. No, I can't, because if I look other way, the banana might disappear. And for me, it was a good example of that illusion, that attachment. Sometimes the story goes like that banana might be a person. You're heartbroken because that's the only person that you can be in for your order to be happy, and you're missing the whole background. And Aparigraha is telling you, hey, let go, release the hands. It might not happen with a person, but it might happen to a place. Or if I live in this place, I'm gonna be happy. Well, you're attaching your happiness, the illusion of happiness, to a place. Every time we attach our happiness to the external circumstances, which are in constant change, we're bounding ourselves to pain, because again, the only, like the Tao said, the only constant thing in life is change. When we attach our happiness to conditions, then we're gonna suffer, because it's out of control and things are gonna change. Things will always change, and what is bringing a pleasure might change at some point. And that's another thing. Sometimes we're happy in something and it's bringing a pleasure, then it stops and we cannot see it because we're attached to the idea that it worked, it stopped working, and we can't let it go. Then Aparigraha, the discernment, okay, it's time to let it go. And in Aparigraha, discernment, it's very important. The constant paying attention to your thoughts and knowing, like, okay, this is working, this is not working. This is working for me, it stopped working. This is not working for others. I think that one important thing to rescue about Aparigraha is when you find that state of Siddham, the more that you let go on desire, on attachment to things, on attachment to conditions, idea, you become more free. And by doing that, you're allowing the people around you to be more free, because you're accepting yourself. And as you accept yourself and as you love yourself, once again, the principle of Ahimsa, Satya, they're all coming together. You allow others, you allow the space to others to feel the same. And that's the concept of Aparigraha. And here is when we close the episode of today. Take a moment, take a week, take a month to chew on everything, to notice where the areas in our life that you want to work on these different yamas. See where they come together. They always come together. They always intertwine. And journal about it. Some people like to journal, some people don't. Writing is very important for the brain as well. So I always advise not even typing, writing about areas, commitments that we can make to follow the path of this branch of the yamas. Feel welcome to share it with me. I'm always like to hear how is it working, different points of perspective, how yamas working for you. So let's close the eyes for a moment, join the hands together. Loka samastas ginam bhavantu. May all living creatures find peace and happiness in this world. May my words, actions, and thoughts contribute to the peace and happiness of others. Namaste.